What's up, world? This is Raw with Live Loud coming at you guys again with another episode of Say It Loud. So Say It Loud has been such an honor to get together with people who I've met, and I've been actually being introduced to people who I haven't physically met, but who are doing such incredible things. That leads me to one person that I've recently physically met, but I've known for, I think, over a year now. My man, Craig. What's up, Craig? How's it going, man?
What's going on? Just trying to maintain and get through this whole situation.
I hear you, man. I hear you. So I think it was a year, maybe a year and a half ago that we were connected.
Yeah, actually it might be longer than that because I've been told about you before my trip to South Africa with one of our volunteers that came, and that was last January, so more than probably a year and a half.
Yeah. And so it's cool because, like, I mean, I've been your fan ever since, man. I really enjoy seeing all the projects, all the things you do. So let's get into that real quick. Let people know who you are and what you're up to. What do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Craig Taylor. I'm formerly a teacher in Queens, New York, and I got hired to be a program director for underperforming schools all around New York City. The things that I saw in that program, I specifically worked in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn with underperforming schools, underprivileged kids, and that just led me to wanting to do more for education, not just locally, but globally. And I started this organization that I call Only Love Foundation. Our mission is to build schools around the world and bring education to help children and adults prosper in underprivileged, underperforming, underserved communities around the world.
That's fantastic, man. When we met that one time, you were walking me through this journey of how you stumbled upon that, right? This wasn't an organization that already existed. This wasn't some premeditated thing, but it's something that happened through your experience and your own leadership, man. So what was your story that led you to that? What's been your journey that has gotten you there?
Yeah, so like I said, it started as me being a teacher. I was actually a phys ed teacher, and a lot of older kids in high school don't want to, be involved. They just want to sit down. So I used to beat my kids up. I used to choke them up and beat them up, and I didn't get fired for that. The principal, the administration, the government, actually, the parents, they all actually like how I interacted with the kids and got the kids to be more involved, being more of a friend than a teacher, an authority figure. So they asked me to be a program director for all underperforming schools in New York City. And they placed me in Bed-Stuy at a middle school, which had some wonderful people, wonderful kids, but a lot of the kids were from single parent homes. They were from shelters. A lot of kids were homeless and they would come to school. So my job there was to hire a bunch of teachers to facilitate the education of hundreds of kids. So specifically in one school, MS 267 in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn on Gates Avenue, I had to hire 14 teachers to help me educate over 400 students. And these students, they didn't want to be home because, they went to shelters, they went to, homeless places, they went to foster homes where they weren't being treated well. And, in those kind of neighborhoods, school's not that great either. Their peers, some teachers don't want to be there, honestly speaking. So their only outlet was to join gangs. They go on the street after school and a gang on the corner at a store would say, "What's up, shorty? You don't want to go home? You want to be in school? You want to make some money? You want friends, that you want somebody to show you love? I got you." And it was as simple as that for a kid to say, "Hey, this person's gonna give me friendship, family, and money." That's a no-brainer. So these kids start selling drugs and getting into crime, and that's where my story began. Because one day, one of my teachers, her name is Miss Davis, actually. She was screaming for me, Mr. Taylor, come help me out." So I come to her classroom and she's arguing with the student. She says, "Mr. Taylor, please talk to this kid. He has a bunch of money in his pocket." This kid, an 8th grade student, pulls out $100 bills that thick, all hundreds, in 8th grade. And she looks at him and says, "I'm going to call your dad and tell him you took all that money out of the house." And forgive my language, but this kid said, "Bitch, what are you talking about? I work for my father," to his teacher. And later in the year, maybe 3 months later, I come to work one day and I see this kid in handcuffs, juvenile detention van outside. His mom is crying all over me, telling me to do something, but at this point the police have him already, ready to take him, ship him off. So I can't do anything, and he just has a stone face looking at me like, "I don't know why my mom is crying. This is what happens to us. This is what," as if to say, this is what happens to kids in my circumstance, young Black kids, young minority kids in the ghetto and low income areas. This is natural. This happened to my uncle. This happened to my cousin. Why is my mom crying over me going? I was expecting this. So after that, I said to myself, okay, I have 399 other kids that I have to do better for. So I try to do as much as I can, bring them on trips, expose them to things that they wouldn't have otherwise seen. One thing I never tell people, my mom thought I was crazy when I showed her a picture of this. I hired this reptile company to bring snakes and bearded dragons and an alligator to my high school and my middle school in Brooklyn. And these kids were like, "Yeah, what are you doing? Don't bring those things in here." But after an hour of learning about them, you'll see, I'll post pictures of it, you see my kids holding these animals, and that just goes to show you that we fear what we don't know, and just exposing kids to things to teach them will help them broaden their mindset. And so that was my goal there, until one day, one of my kids that lived in a shelter with his mom and two sisters, he had a pink hand-me-down princess book bag that was old. He had to get it from his sisters. The princess was worn out, pink was worn out. Kids used to make fun of him for wearing it. And one day he walks out of my program and his book bag just turns to dust. It's like the bottom of it just falls out. All his pens, papers, books, everything falls on the floor. And all the older kids, bigger kids, stood around him pointing, laughing, calling him dirty, calling him poor. And it was something about that moment that was what clicked my mind, because he didn't cry, which is probably what I would have did. He didn't want to fight, which is probably what I would have did. He just picked up his stuff with a smile and walked out of the door with high energy and high morality somehow. That there was just something at that moment that just clicked to me more than anything ever else has. And I quit that job 2 weeks later, and I said I want to do more for education around the world. And speaking to a friend of mine who's from South Africa, she said, go do some research in Southern Africa. I'll send you to a bunch of schools. And I just quit my job, picked up and left for a month and a half, and just traveled around Southern Africa, specifically researching education in schools. And what I saw was way worse than anything I had mentioned in Brooklyn in those two stories.
Wow, man, there's there's a couple of things that really stood out so much. First of all, thank you for telling that story, and thank you for your continued stands for how you work with kids, how you interact with them. You could clearly tell that it's not just a job, that there's some message behind that. But there's a couple of things that I've come across people who have that prejudgment a bit. And to be honest, I probably am guilty of that judgment as well, of like, we have our own decisions. We can step outside of it if we really choose to. The obstacles might be harder, but we are free to make those choices, right? But when you paint that scenario, I remember when you painted that scenario to me before about this kid who doesn't have protection, doesn't have family, doesn't have connection, doesn't have money, doesn't have support, lives in fear, and then has someone that he sees be successful in his area saying, I got you. It is kind of a no-brainer. How else is a young kid without developing that type of personality really know? Some people can place their prejudgment to say that, well, it's that kid to choose not to get involved. But how many people actually live in their dreams, right? How many people right now that say that are living the life that they want to live? It's your choice to live that. It's not so easy, right? Imagine coming from an area like that where the opportunities are even more scarce.
Yeah. No, they don't understand, and that breaks my heart. It almost makes me want to cry just hearing you say that, because nobody thinks that way. Everything you see, I'll see friends that are privileged that were born and raised in houses and be like, oh, these people from these hoods are so lazy and they just want welfare and they don't want to work. And it's just like, everybody can't make it out because they don't have the resources and the knowledge that is given to them in order for them to do that. Like, if you don't know what an engineer is, how are you gonna go for that specific job if you don't understand? Like, they're busy in school just battling, getting out of a basic day. So I wish everybody could understand that, but nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what you just said, even that the knowledge of not knowing of what that opportunity could stand like. There's a lot of places that I've gone around the world in very rural, like underdeveloped areas, where the only options of success in career is you become a doctor or you become an engineer. And engineer means you're a mechanic. It's not an engineer that we're hearing about. It's like, oh yeah, I'm an engineer, I work on cars.
Yeah.
And that's their level of ambition. Other than that, they're an entrepreneur selling fruits, selling services, selling whatever they possibly can that's within their reach. It's not about just laziness. The obstacles are just far beyond we could ever comprehend, because imagine living under those circumstances daily. Your leadership, as in your parents, your uncles, your families, your friends, their friends, are all part of this type of community. So, but how do you step to the side of the only thing you know?
Yeah, you can't. And, I'm, like I said, guilty of it. I'm guilty of it too. My family's guilty of it because when I was younger, I'm lucky enough for my parents to get out of that situation and move us somewhere better. But we're from Brownsville, Brooklyn, which wasn't a nice place. A lot of people don't make it out of there. My father became a police officer, which gave him the opportunity to become a detective. My mom worked for housing, but all they exposed to me was you could be a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher. And it's just like, all right, those are my options. But all right, now I know what I'm going for. I wanted to be a cop at one point because I thought that's what was only out there. Then I graduate high school, and my friends are all kinds of things. And I'm just like, what was that? What do you mean you're a marine biologist for this? And then there's 100 biologies and all these different things and 100 different kinds of engineers. And then just so many things. I'm just like, I didn't even know what that was. And people don't understand that some people don't know that. People that are from low income areas never heard of these things. We're not lazy. We're not stupid. We just didn't get exposed to that like you did.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. So tell us what that was like when you went over there, and how did you go from exploring Africa and the Southern Africa, the education sector, and then leading to launching an organization? What was that transition like?
Yeah, so my mindset on the plane going over there was, if this is happening in New York City, one of the greatest cities in the world, what is it like in other countries? Because I've heard it's bad. So I went with that mindset to see. And some of the first things I saw was schools that were made out of all metal in 100-degree weather, which means that they're just hot boxes. Metal is a heat conductor, so 100 degrees outside, 120 degrees inside. So that was one obstacle. I saw kids walking to school up to 2.5 hours barefoot. I actually took that journey with some kids, some 5-year-old kid waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to walk 2 hours to school. And I said, wow, these are things that I didn't even think of. I'm sitting here thinking that it'll be a bigger scale of drug dealing kids and, poor kids here, but this is another level of poverty and of injustice, because education should be a fundamental right for everyone. What you do with it after can be your choice, but we should all get the same equal education. And what I saw was a complete opposite of that. It was not education at all. It was just babysitting, giving the kids a place to go where they're barely learning anything. So I said, okay, I have to do something about that. Step one would to be get these kids out of these structures that are made out of, terrible materials that are hazardous to their health, and get them onto a proper school. So we built our first school after a year of fundraising through, just individuals, friends, family, social media. And once we built that, it looked beautiful. The kids were out of danger and into a nice school. But, just collecting data on their grades and seeing how they progressed from the old school to the new school, there was nothing really happening there. And that makes you say to yourself, okay, we put them in a better school. I heard building schools around the world was great. I seen Oprah do it. I seen all these other organizations do it. Why is it not working? Then you realize it's not the school that was the problem. It was the community issues, whether it be hunger, whether it be, they don't know how to prosper because they don't have technology to see what's going on in the modern world. They're still doing things that were happening in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is not progressive. You're not going to make it anywhere if you don't catch up to what's happening now in the world. So I switched my mindset to not only building schools, but building schools and attacking whatever community issue that area is having. And, for 2 examples of it, in Hama Bay, Kenya, where we built our first school, the kids only ate at once a day at 12 noon. And then they weren't promised a meal for another day. So we figured that we should add into our curriculum permaculture, which is, growing food on your own land, the techniques to growing food. So we built about, acres, to say a area of maybe 3 or 4 football fields. We built a permaculture farm where we grow thousands of fruits and vegetables, and we ended hunger. And now we added that into the curriculum of the school so the kids learn the basic day-to-day things with permaculture on top of that. And now they know how to grow food in their own backyard. And then we added business on top of that, so they know how to sell food, the surplus of vegetation, to local markets. So now they're making money and having food. So we ended hunger and poverty in this area through proper education. And the second one was the largest slum in Africa, which is called Kibera, which is in the middle of Nairobi in Kenya. And there's no means of prosperity there either. People go to school and there's an 8th grade test. If you don't pass it, that's it for you. There's no retaking this exam. You end up having to steal, sell drugs, do drugs, whatever your escape needs to be. So we said we need to do something about that. Those kids that don't pass that test, that has no possibility to go into the next phase of education. But if we bring technology, even if they don't pass that test, they have ways to make money and see what else is out there for them to do. So we brought thousands of computers to Kenya to teach these kids, coding, graphic design, web design, basic Microsoft Office skills, so they can get interviews and internships and things like that. So hopefully we're in the beginning phases of that, but hopefully that works the same way that Hama Bay did. In the past, 5 months since November 2019, and it is April 2020 now, we built 5 computer labs in Kenya, all around Kenya. So we're in the beginning phase of just teaching them basics on how to use a computer. And once we're able to travel again after this COVID situation, we're gonna get the internet set up and teach them what's out there.
Yeah. And this is really brilliant, man. I really love this because aside from giving and just being mindful about what you want to implement outside in education in the world, right? Because there's a lot of people that I would say that giving becomes very conditional, and giving becomes a very egotistical thing. It's like, I'm giving because it makes me feel good, right? So there's probably a lot of organizations who have thought, let's build a school in Africa, right? It's not the first time we're hearing this by far, right? And it ends there. And what happens is that these facilities end up becoming abandoned. They ended up becoming just part of the community, but not in the sense of what it was built for, right? There's not utilized for education because it's not something sustainable. But you were able to look at this, say, all right, I built this. Now you unveil the next problem or what's really occurring. And then you take initiative, continue doing that. I love that you said that, okay, something needs to be done here, because in reality, nothing needed to be done, but you chose to do that. When did you start being that person? Or were you always like that?
I was always like that. A story about that, a quick one that I found out about myself was I got knee surgery and I came out of it all like days from coming out of anesthesia. And the doctors was asking me questions. I'm just being really nice to the doctor, saying, yes, thank you, just being ultra nice. And the doctor looks at my dad and he's like, is he like just high or is he always like and my dad said, no, he's always been like that. And that made me realize like, wow, I just always been that kind of person. I always put people before myself. I enjoy it. It feels good. But I literally and really, truly like seeing people prosper, even if it's prospering beyond what I'm doing.
Yeah, man. And I want to acknowledge you for that because we're not perfect. We're far from perfect, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that people don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that we don't get our side or our flaws, that we don't embrace them, but we have the ability to consciously choose what do we want to lean into, right? Because none of us are this 100% whatever of anything, right?
True.
We all have this combination of it, but what do we constantly practice so that it becomes our norm? I really can't wait for all this to be done, man, because I'm we've been talking about it for like a year and a half now. I was like, all right, cool, we're gonna make it happen, man. In this divine timing, whenever it's perfectly aligned and perfectly right, man, we'll go.
Yeah, I believe that as well.
There's so many places that I've come across around the world that can use our services.
Yeah.
There's so many places around the world that is within our reach. Not necessarily that you need to open up a foundation or you need to do anything like that, but you could go and volunteer or work with organizations like with the Love Foundation, and so great stuff, man. So the people who are listening, like I said, that are, just in quarantine right now and wanting to get involved or believe that there's something there or that are involved adamantly in their profession the way you've been as an educator, what would you suggest for people that could be doing right now?
I suggest doing research on seeing which organizations are doing what. Like, everybody doesn't have to be into education. Everybody doesn't have to be in health or food. Whatever you feel like you're passionate about or you always want to do, because everybody innate, we all want to do something good. We just don't know how, like you always say. I think doing a little bit of research on organizations and checking out their social media to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. You can reach out to a lot of organizations and get involved. I think a big issue is that when we go to Google, only the big organizations come up, and then we send them an email and we don't hear anything back. But there's a ton of little people doing amazing things out there, doing things as big as the big organizations. Yeah. And they will answer you with a snap of a finger if you just message them. So reach out to those people and you could be involved easily. I always tell people, like, you know, you could either do this with me or you could do this with someone else. You know, just make sure you do it.
A lot of times the larger organizations, they're already recognized, they're already funded, they're already doing this stuff. But what I've also noticed that they're not in the crevice of these small villages, small
No.
micro communities that are going under the radar. They're not seen. You know, when I went to go work with an organization out in Brazil in the favelas, there wasn't no big organizations that were going and touching on those grounds. Those were people who decided to take initiative and do so. So
Yeah.
thank you again for doing that. And I know you're currently doing stuff here in New York to help out with the current situation, man. What are you up to?
Yeah, absolutely. Once I heard that our nurses were getting sick because we ran out of protective uniforms and masks and everything, I started reaching out to anybody and everybody I know that works for a company that could have possibly had masks in a closet. And I haven't got as many as I need, but I gave about 50 out to certain nurse friends around New York so they can be protected, because, you know, a bunch of my friends contracted the virus through being nurses, which is just the craziest thing to hear. Like, imagine we lose all of our nurses, then what? And I heard from a bunch of doctors that while they're working, they can't stop. Overtime is unlimited now. So when they go eat, they go order their food from the cafeteria at their hospital, and they just stuff their face and go back. So I'm calling a bunch of restaurants to see who wants to donate, you know, some catered food that we could bring to a bunch of hospitals that are on the front lines right now. And I would love for anybody that's possible to help us out,
Absolutely, man. The front lines is exactly it, man. They are the people that are treating this whole situation. They're facing it straight on. They're the ones who are in constant contact all day, every day, that they're just going and engaging with that, man. I have a couple of people who are nurse friends and doctors, and they're there, and they get to be set up properly. They get to be really taken care of right now as they're doing what they're standing to do. So everyone listening, if you guys have any resources, think outside the box. It could be medical supplies, it could be you know, face masks, even hand sanitizer, whatever. If you have access or know places that have it, if you know restaurants, if you know people that have resources that could contribute to daily life, to sustainability or anything like that, get in touch with myself, get in touch with Craig, and see how you could go and be part of this. And if that is outside of your circle, if you don't have people in your community that could really do like that, start entertaining the idea of, where can I get involved? I guarantee you, you're gonna walk away with so much, not just the impact that you're doing, but the impact that it makes upon yourself as well. Is just, as Craig has experienced being on the ground, as I've experienced being on the ground around the world doing what I do, it will change you. It will change you, and it will change you in the ways that can support you making the change out there that's really needed.
Absolutely.
So really, thanks a million, man, for your story. What are some of your handles? Where can people follow you? People can tune in and check out and share your platform.
Yes, absolutely. We're most active on Instagram at Only Love Foundation. Our website is onlylovefoundation.org. And our Facebook is Facebook/Only Love Foundation, where we post all of our work. One thing that people ask us, how do we separate ourselves from other organizations? You will always see us on the ground doing work. When you give us a donation, when you hand us money or some kind of in-kind donation, you will know where it is, because you'll see me physically giving it to people on the ground around the world. So
yeah, which I'd love to see, man. Please follow these pages, check out what they're doing. If you feel called to jump on, join, you know, just see how you get involved inside the organization. And if not, if there's something else that's really calling to you, whether it could be animal activism, it could be environmental, you know, activists, anything to really go and step out, take this opportunity to just take a browse, see if something that catches the eye, and then if something does, just get called enough to go and make that step. So Craig, thank you so much, man, for sharing your story, man. It's really brilliant, bro.
Thank you for this. I always wanted to do this with someone, to get it out. I've never done it on film, to put out there. So thank you. It feels good to have done this. I appreciate you putting this together for everybody.
For sure, man. I'm just warming you up, man, because you're going to be in front of the camera really soon. Don't worry about
it. Oh, yeah.
We'll make it happen. All right, guys. So everyone tuning in, stay tuned to more episodes of Say It Loud, where we hear about extraordinary people just doing brilliant things for the world around us, and the stories that make us all human. You know, this didn't happen by accident. This doesn't happen by luck or convenience. Sometimes it took redefining everything you knew in order to create something that you didn't know. So thank you guys for tuning in. Stay tuned, and we will be talking very soon. Peace.
Get myself because
Get a photo?
I did it last time. All right, say it loud.